start? Stuart, Stu.
Hi.
I am so glad to be here with you. And okay if we stand, because it feels awkward to do a sit
Yes,
down.
I don't like to sit down. That's not in my remit.
Okay, great.
And thank you, before we begin, for putting me through the exquisitely vulnerable experience of standing back there whilst an entire room full of people watched me do comedy that I had no control over anymore.
Well, I'm so glad to be here with you. I'm glad to be here with you, my climate leaders, many of us who think we are also comedians. Regardless, we need all the help we can get. So, Stu, what do you got for us?
Well, thank you. I think that's an interesting point, the idea of you needing all the help you can get. Because in comedy, we say the problems are the material. That's where all the comedians' material comes from. You have a problem in your life, a problem in society, a political or environmental problem, and you pour over it and you try and crack into it, and that's where you find the funny stuff. So the problems are the material. And as a climate comedian, what a relief, because there are so many problems. There are so many problems. And so I have this infinite amount of material to work with as I'm sort of processing my own climate dread. That's where the show originated from, was a few years ago, realizing that I couldn't think about or I couldn't write about anything else, and wanting to transmit that to other people, and then recognizing that maybe there was a need for it or a desire for it, because I know that working in climate, many of you will swing wildly between hope and then despair on a day-to-day basis, feeling completely burnt out, feeling as challenged as I do when you come across a new fact, or a conversation here sparks something when you realize, oh, this compostable cup, it's not all that compostable unless it goes a special process. I didn't want to know that. You know, and you can feel really negative about it. You can feel really upset, but the problems are the material, so that's the bread and butter to me. And also, what it means is that when I do the show, and some of you can come and see tonight, not all of you, there won't be enough room, but do line up as swiftly as you can. But also, I have a kind of a version of it that I offer to businesses, where I kind of brief with the CSR leader, the CSO, and I kind of work out what messaging they've been saying so long that no one's hearing it anymore. And I say to them, what would you say to your CEO if you could sort of slap them against the face? I'll try and make that funny, and I'll try and weave it in, and then I'll come and do an event for you, and then you can put that in front of them and say, see, we all saw you laugh at that guy, and now you know the stuff. And whenever I've said that to people here at GreenBiz, I've heard the sentence, oh, we need that. And that is not a sentence that comedians ever hear. So I'm very, very pleased to be here.
And I know that comedy is about connection. Like, you've already connected with this audience right in 2 minutes. And how are you doing that kind of connection on a hard topic like the climate crisis?
So connection in comedy, I think, it's a connection with your audience, and that connection is brought about through being authentic. I think in order to be authentic, you need to make yourself vulnerable. You need to genuinely make yourself vulnerable. You need to sort of have genuine risk to what you're saying. You know, I wish I'd known as a child, I wish someone had said to me, oh, if you want to, they should give this lesson in schools. They say, if you want people to like you, tell a story where you failed. I wish I'd heard that earlier in my life. I thought you had to boast about your achievements. I mean, I realize I'm in America now. You may have a different approach, but certainly in the UK, and I think this is universal, if you can say to someone, honestly, I'm struggling with this. I don't know what to do about that. I'm challenged by this. I'm really worried about that. Then you can make, through taking that risk, you can make an authentic connection with people, and you can communicate with them authentically. And I think that's so important, to get people to understand your messaging, whether it's internal comms or whether it's your messaging to your consumers, whoever it is, or the people above you, whoever. If you can say what you really mean with an authentic voice, and it helps, you have to be personal, you have to be specific. That joke there in the business class joke about metal cutlery. I said metal cutlery because obviously terrorists can't afford business class. People laugh at that because if you have been a business class traveller, you'll know you get metal cutlery, and you probably noticed that that was weird and not what you'd thought was allowed, but you didn't notice that you'd noticed it. So that's the skill of a comic, is trying to draw out those things that people have noticed, but they haven't noticed that they've noticed. So you have to be really detailed. You have to be, I think of it in terms of, like, if I asked you now to draw a hand, most of us, untrained graphic artists, we would draw a sort of blob with 5 blobs coming off it and go, there we go, that's a hand. We would draw what we think a hand is supposed to look like. But an artist, real artist, would, I say real artist to separate from comedians, but a real artist would go, what do I actually see? What is the shadow? What's the light? Where are the lines? And that's what we try to do, to be as specific and detailed as possible with the stories that we tell based on an authentic connection with the audience.
And I'm sure that this doesn't happen to you often, but when a bit does fail,
How dare you?
you make yourself vulnerable.
Yes.
And no connection.
Yes.
What do you do?
That can happen. That happened to me at Wembley Arena in front of 16,000 people. I walked out on stage. I'd been told, I had the mic in my hand, and the sound tech backstage had said to me, make sure you keep the mic right up close to your hand, right up close to your mouth so they can hear you. And I walked out on stage for the first time at Wembley Arena. On the back of the stage it says, "Hello Wembley," in huge letters. And I was so caught up in the sort of the majesty of the moment, I went, "Hello!" Like that, and oh my God, 16,000 people saw me make this sort of awful amateurish mistake. But I have to remind myself that my job, when things go wrong, I have to remind myself that my job is simply to build a house of cards. If you've ever seen anyone build a house of cards in triangles, the reason it's compelling to watch is because there is real risk. It could go wrong. If you saw someone build a house of cards with sticky tape and glue, you wouldn't watch it for 2 seconds. What would be the point? So I have to remind myself, if I'm to be authentic, I have to take real risks. The risk is what makes it so compelling. So when something goes wrong, if my joke goes wrong, if someone slams the door and blows my house of cards over, all I can do is smile to myself, take a deep breath, and calmly start trying to rebuild it. So it can go wrong, and it hurts when it goes wrong, but there's no point crying about it. You just have to go, oh, never mind, start again.
And do you think GreenBiz 24 can do that?
Yes, yes, I think anyone can do that. I think certainly some of the incredibly, I mean, I've met so many people here just in the last 24 hours. I think that, I was interviewing some people yesterday for the live stream, and I would chat to them beforehand and say, what's going on? And they'd tell me what was really going on. And then we'd get on the, with all due respect to these wonderful people I was interviewing, I'd say, what's going on? And they'd tell me the slightly more mediated version of what's going on. And I think certainly here, if not in your own organizations, I think it's so valuable to say the unsayable, to say the real thing, the thing that makes you feel vulnerable, to say the thing which you feel like, well, I mean, between you and me, or I don't know. You might feel like you don't want to share that because it makes you vulnerable. I would suggest, and we talked about this, maybe this is a challenge for you for the rest of your day here at GreenBiz. If the next time someone asks, what are you into, what are you talking about, what are you challenged by right now, if you can push yourself to try to say what you really mean. And so we thought to make this easier, for the session after this, wherever you go, where you're having lunch or what have you, if someone asks you what's going on, just as you ask them, just grab it, just give them a little signal, just that, just touch your earlobe, and that means I am happy to have a real conversation with you about what you really mean and what I really mean. So try that for the rest of the day and see if you're able to just inspire some more meaningful conversations. I feel like some of you are going to do that, and there's one person in the room who's got an itchy ear who's like, this is going to be a nightmare. The rest of my day's ruined.
And what's on the other side of risk? You know, like why aren't people saying what they really mean?
Yes.
Why do you think that's happening?
The risks that we take are different, right? My risk is I lose my dignity. If, I do a routine, it doesn't work, oh, this is awful, I feel terrible. How bad is that, really? You'll get over it, That was a great moment to leave, sir. My dignity. Your risks will be different. I know that. You're risking, maybe what you're risking is sort of having a predictable rest of your day. If you really take a risk and say what you mean, maybe that's the risk that you're thinking, if this goes wrong or I'm misinterpreted, maybe you lose the predictability of the rest of your day or your week. And you need to be careful. You need to carefully choose the risks that you take. If you want to be authentic, you have to share your real self, but not all of it. You have to sort of choose on purpose and with purpose the parts of your real self that you really want to share. So you have to choose those things very specifically. And I think that allows you to be really intentional about sharing what you want to share. And then, you don't need to take risks. You don't need to make jokes about your stock prices or endanger anything that's really, I think I said stock prices there. Is that a thing? I meant share prices. You don't know. Look to some random person for help. He blinks twice. I'm out. But my point is, you have to decide which risks to take. But you can still do that in an authentic way, I think.
And you and I have given some examples of vulnerability when we've been talking about this, and you were sharing a really great story about being in the forest.
Oh, well, what? Yeah, okay. This is an example, really, of showing vulnerability to an audience and choosing what I share, and also being detailed, that thing about drilling down into the detail. If I say, I have a bit of material about becoming increasingly resentful of my young family whilst on a forest walk. And if I come out and say to an audience, oh, you know, it's hard having kids, well, so what? So far, so bland. No one cares. But if I'm detailed and if I share and I take a risk and say, oh, I'm going to say a thing I really think and I don't know if people are going to connect with this. The line in the show, that's a new show, it's not been released yet in a special, but what I say is I'm sort of imagining an argument with my wife where I'm saying, God, I can't cope with this. I resent them and I resent you. I resent you more. I made them. I only met you. And... And I'm so glad you're laughing, because the risk there, if that falls flat, I'm this bastard. Oh, God. Why is this man so mean to his wife and children? But if I can share that with you in a safe way, in managed conditions, where I've chosen a piece of myself and said, yes, I think if I'm detailed about this emotion, that will resonate with other people who found themselves in that emotional state.
And so you've been up here helping us all with the extra help that we need. And do you have any closing advice, recap of thoughts? What's the big thing you want to leave with?
I think that of the various bits of work that I do in a business sphere, the thing that I think is most enjoyable, a lot of this for me is based on my background as a podcaster. I've spent the last 12 years interviewing over 450 comedians from all over the world in real forensic depth. It's like the only not funny comedy podcast. And you'd love it. It's very fascinating. You won't laugh. And drilling into them, and it started off as an attempt to find out how people write their jokes, and it quickly turned into how do people cope? How do they cope with the challenges of a life, a creative life? How do they cultivate their resilience? How do they cultivate their authenticity? How do they cope with criticism? How do they cope with isolation? All of those things that sort of have parallels for all of us. And I think for me, the biggest element of it is authenticity and being honest and saying what you genuinely mean. And I think that's so important now. I was watching a fabulous talk earlier on in one of the many rooms in this labyrinthine venue, where the people on stage were talking about what it meant to them to really communicate with their audience. And I think if you can do that from the basis of an authentic connection, where you make yourself vulnerable, then you will be streets ahead of your competition.
Well, I hope all of us do a little today. If you want to catch more Stu, and I'm sure you do, you can catch him at 4:15. We're doing slide deck karaoke. This is where people in the audience raise their hand to present a deck they have never seen before.
Come along to that. It's only going to work if there's loads of us.
I got a disco ball from the amazing James Ball, so it's going to be a good time. And also 7 p.m. at the Meritage, Stu is doing a whole set. So again, line up swiftly for that.
Start lining up now.
Big round of applause for Stuart Goldsmith.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.